Good day, everyone. So, an interesting point for me very often is sort of relating to both the people that create content for Genshin as well as the people that consume content for Genshin and their sort of discussions around the content that they see on YouTube and so on. And this is very, very interesting. So, this is why I want to sort of make this video. And I think let's just sort of kick it off by talking about the frustrations that a lot of people have regarding content creators and so on YouTube. Now, this will not obviously apply to Twitch because Twitch is a bit different. People interact with their content creators and so on. But with regards to YouTube, a lot of people watch videos, they sort of look at recommendations and so on. So let's sort of take this as a starting point. A big frustration for a lot of F2P players in general is the fact that their favorite content creator or creators and so on typically have access to almost all of the units. Well, because that's kind of your job as a content creator, you should showcase and evaluate units. But as the person watching, it almost feels like, there's a bit of a disconnect because you don't have access to those units. And what's even worse is, let's say you've got a character that you really like, you've recently pulled for them, and well, your favorite content creator says, well, the best meta correct way to use your character is to use units X and Y or whatever is sort of appropriate, and then you'll be like, well, I like my character, but I don't have unit X or Y. I just don't have enough primo gems to pull for them. I don't have enough resources to build for them, and Sumeru is coming along, and I'm pretty much torn between all the new characters, etc., etc. And this definitely creates a lot of like disconnect and a lot of like discontent, especially when people tell you that, oh, why aren't you pulling for unit so and so, because they'll just be so good for your account. And it's just like, well, maybe you don't want that unit, you want something else. And then later on you learn that, yeah, I like units A and B, but they just don't work together, and I'd have nothing else that actually synergizes. And it is a big frustration to a lot of people. It is a big frustration if you've got to spend and like a lot of time in this game only to find out by a lot of people that what you pulled for is not that good. And this is why then you get the whole sort of, oh, waifu versus meta sort of thing, just play the abyss and have fun, all these sorts of sentiments. And by the way, a lot of these sentiments are indeed correct. You do need to play the game for fun and so on, but you do sense that it's not just that people say, well, yeah, play the game for fun. Very often it's like, yeah, forget meta, just play for fun. It's the entire way and tone in which sort of people would sort of put it across, and then therefore you also get like these schisms in the community, because other people would be like, well, I don't care about how the players look or whatever, I just want to sort of beat the spiral bus as fast as possible. And it's always just like this tug of war between like certain player ideologies and so on. So it is interesting from my perspective, and none of this is sort of helped by the fact that a lot of the times content creators would sort of do these pre-release analysis. They would try and not overhype a unit, and I think it's a lot of these things do a lot of damage. So like, for instance, take Yelon. There's a reason I've got her in the background. When she came out, a lot of people said, yeah, she's functionally damage-wise and equivalent to about Xingshu and so on. I'm not going to overhype the unit. I'll only give her an arbitrary number out of 5 and so on. And there are genuinely a lot of people that took that seriously, that did not pull for this unit. And what happened like 2 weeks later? Well, double hydro is kind of the new meta in town, and yeah, it does lead people to be quite a bit irritated, because it's like, well, you told me you wanted me not to be overhyped for a unit, and this unit turned out to be the base unit. And then people say, well, don't be an idiot, what if you got a Yaimiko? And it's like, well, I can make her work. What's like your problem? And so like the little Discord goes on, and then we get back to the whole waifu versus meta versus fun versus all this sort of nonsense. And I do think in a certain sense, and I want to blame all the content creators for this, they really do not do enough effort in terms of actually showcasing alternative ways of sort of playing the game. And what I mean by that is sort of telling people how you can actually explore the more practical and fundamental fun aspects of a character. So if someone does like Yaimiko, the question would not be, oh, well, you should be pulling for something else instead, or Hoya versus Dirty or so on. You need people to be able to really take a look at Yaimiko, to really study the character, in depth, and then your content creators should not just give you a quick day one impression and then a follow-up video, whatever. They should really study these characters for like the full 20 days that they're out, understand every single nuance, every single animation, dash canceling, sort of rotations and patterns, because if you don't do it, you get these very, very silly ideas. For instance, that Kuki Shinobu doesn't do any real sort of damage, and what's the kind of point, or you completely ruined the character, and so on. And then suddenly, once again, 2 weeks later, people wake up and realize that, oh, wait a minute, this character is actually kind of good in reaction-based teams. And yeah, the fact that you have a unit that gives you on-demand healing no matter where you are on the field, and that's only tied to her elemental skill, not her elemental burst, that is kind of cool and kind of like very refreshing in terms of gameplay, in terms of how you experience and understand reactions in an AoE area and so on, that can be triggered by Cookie. So really, my biggest complaint about a lot of these YouTubers is that they sort of have a lot of stock standard formulas. They talk about CV values, and there's very, very little creativity when it comes to the practical aspects of playing the game. And of course, on the other side of it, you have all the theory crafters that do an inordinate amount of little testing, little tweaking on spreadsheets and so on, to the point that for those people that do care about it, well, good on you. For the rest of us, we just need a couple of ballpark figures and like practical advice on sort of how to play the game. And this is one of those things that's also like gives a lot of contention and so on, because if someone says, yeah, by the way, Yeilon at C0 is functionally equivalent to Xingshu at C6 and these sort of little comps and so on, it does give a bit of like it does irk a lot of people. And very often the reason it frustrates players is because the theory crafting side gives you a set of expected values that you can read on a spreadsheet, whereas your actual in-game experience encompasses the full randomness and the full set of random outcomes that are tied to your damage distribution or the damage that you've done in, let's say, a 25-second window. And because of that disconnect, people would very often say, well, I don't trust the theory crafters. And this is the sort of contention that or like contempt that you get between different groups, like casual players, meta players, theory crafters. It's just a big, big mess. And the best way and reason to sort of fix this is to properly acknowledge the full scope of randomness and how that randomness is tied to your ability to play in the game. And once you've quantified that, it suddenly makes a lot more sense why certain team comps seem to be hit or miss, why certain team comps and variations are always working, etc., etc. And I think then we can have a much more proper discussion as to why certain things happen, why you would want to use certain units in certain ways, and hopefully we can get to a point where people are educated without necessarily having to understand the maths. And I do think this watering down of, let's say, using only CV values definitely does way more harm than good, because whenever you try to take very, very complex topics and you try to simplify them too much, there's so much nuance that gets lost out, and then you just have bun fights like all over again. So at the end of the day, this is just my own narrow perspective on it. What I try to do on my channel is to try and give the guys a lot of like practical sort of experience, as in terms of like how you should be playing characters. I have had like lots of feedback where people have said, yeah, I don't have this character, but I've never thought that you could use character X like this. Or a lot of people have said, oh my god, I've got this character, but I didn't realize you could play her in such a very a different way. And that's ultimately just like sort of what makes me happy. As long as I can give people practical advice, as long as they can see things that are like, oh, this is something new, perhaps I can try it as well, then I'm very, very happy. And as long as the things that they can try are account agnostic, in other words, things that don't really depend on builds and so on, then I'm happy. Then as far as I'm concerned, I've done sort of my job. But yeah, let me know what you think of my channel in terms of the content and so on, and how guilty of a lot of these things I am. Cheers.